Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Of course, only if you feel that this video is deserving of it. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post brand new content just like this all of the time. I also have a back catalog of over 600 videos just like this one, if that's something that you're interested in. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. My dad was, and still is, my hero. I'm sure it sounds like just another worn-out cliche, and it might be. But it is very important to me that you remember this piece of information because otherwise, all the things that I am going to tell you about, all the actions I've taken, will make me seem like a total lunatic. He was an anthropologist by trade, and you could tell from the moment you met him, even as young as I was, I knew. I knew that my dad loved people. He was fascinated by them, and he adored everything about them. It was woven into the dorky Hawaiian dad shirts he wore when he threw spontaneous backyard barbecues, tucked into his palm as he enthusiastically shook hands with every barista and bank teller he met, and etched into the crinkles of his eyes as he let out another boisterous laugh. The sort of laugh that made everyone else in the area want to laugh with him. People, it seems, loved him too. He wrote a lot of books, and apparently his personality shone even in writing because they sold incredibly well. It was after the smashing success of one book in particular, one discussing folk legends in our home state of Colorado, that he decided we would buy the vacation home. God, it seems bitterly ironic looking back on it now, but we'll get to that. The vacation home was in a tiny Welsh town called Arforder. It was, as the Welsh name suggests, on the sea, and the town lined a semicircular divot in the country's coastline, flanked on either side by craggy cliffs. Only a short distance out from the beach, approximately where the center of the circle would be if it were completed, there was a tiny island. It was scarcely more than a large rock, harboring little besides a couple of small grottos and a smattering of gulls' nests. It was called Morgan's Isle. I only ever got to spend a couple of summers at the house, but I remember those summers very fondly. My dad was deeply interested in the area, not only because of his appreciation for Welsh culture, or what little remained after the gentrification of the area, and also because of some of the town's more unique attractions. Two in particular stand out to me as I reflect on it, and both involve the island. If you were outside at night, or when a dense fog had blanketed the town, you could hear a low, haunting melody rolling in off the sea. It was like someone playing the flute, resonant and mournful, far away across the water. My dad thought that it was the wind, catching in the cracks and crevices of Morgan's Isle, and flowing back out across the water, friction from the sea-soaked rocks producing the ghostly howl. During the day, he said, the sounds of the town drowned it out, but at night, we would sit together on the back porch of the house and listen to the island sing across the inky sea. From our porch, it was also possible to observe the other phenomena. If you looked out towards the island on a clear night, it was possible to see small, glittering points of light drifting over the dark water. They typically appeared in pairs, and they seemed to dip and swell as if riding atop the waves. My dad thought that it was a trick of the moonlight, perhaps an unusual reflection from something on the island or the shore, and he thought they were beautiful, like diamonds drifting on the sea, he said, and I looked up at him, stars in my eyes, and agreed. I was only 9 when he disappeared. He had decided that he was going to go out fishing for the day. We had a small boat, and he went out on it pretty frequently, leaving in the mid-morning and not returning until the last dregs of sunlight were slipping from the sky. Usually he would let me come with, and I begged to go that day too, but he wouldn't let me. I'm still not sure why. Maybe I had been particularly clingy for the days preceding, or maybe he was planning to go out and do something dangerous that morning. I don't know. But I do know that, as darkness fell that evening, he didn't come back, and he never did again. They found the boat, bashed up against the cliffs a few miles down the coast from Arfurder, but no sign of Dad. While accidents like this were uncommon in the area, they were not unheard of, and it was ultimately written off as an accidental drowning. They trawled the area for a while, looking for his body, but nothing turned up, and after the worst plane ride of our lives, my mom and I had to bury an empty casket. We didn't go back to the vacation home after that. We were alright financially, as my dad had left us a sizable chunk of savings to supplement my mom's income. But we couldn't face going back to where it had all happened. At the same time, though, my mom couldn't bear to get rid of the place, and so it sat, falling into disrepair for 11 years. Until a few days ago. I recently turned 20 and, after having something of an early life crisis, decided it was time to get some closure. My mom was not a big fan of my decision. If it was up to her, we would just let the house rot to nothing and never think about it again. But I had made up my mind, and before she could mount any real effort to stop me, I was bound for Cardiff Airport. I opted to check into Arfurder's small inns rather than attempting to stay in the house. This turned out to be a smart decision, as when I arrived at our old vacation home, it was in a state of severe disrepair. Being so close to the sea, weathering had taken its toll on the home's exterior, and the once well-kept garden had turned into a tangle of unkempt grass and thorny weeds. The interior was largely preserved, save for one room which had flooded through a hole in the roof, but a thick layer of dust had settled over what little furnishings had remained when we'd vacated the place. Evening was fast approaching, and I decided that it would be best if I returned to the inn to decide what to do with the place. As I was pushing through the door, I turned back one last time, half expecting to see my dad sitting on the stairs behind me, but no one was there. After a restless night, I decided to spend the next day, yesterday, out on the water. I bought some supplies from a dingy little tackle shop and slid into a rented boat in the harbor. As I chugged it out into the sea, I had this eerie feeling that I was reliving my dad's last day. Peering across the glittering waves, my eyes snagged on a narrow cave tucked into the jagged flank of Morgan's Isle. I started steering towards it for a moment, but stopped myself. What was I doing? I'd seen people try to approach the cave before, and a patrol boat would always stop you, saying that it wasn't safe for public access. Liable to collapse, they'd say. A tiny part of my brain whispered that they probably hadn't checked there, all those years ago. They would have thought it was too dangerous, not worth the risk of searching. Maybe, just maybe. No. I shook my head as if to knock the idiotic thoughts out of my brain. I was there to get closure, not to open some silly, dangerous, and likely fruitless investigation. I found myself a good spot a little ways past the island instead, and settled in for a day of fishing. I didn't end up catching anything. We had never caught much when I was younger anyway, and the years between had taken their toll on the already dwindling fish population. Besides, I could never quite completely wipe the thoughts of the cave from my mind. Before I knew it, The long, uneasy afternoon had slipped away into evening, and darkness spread quickly across the sky like a stain. As I rounded the island, I could see no other silhouettes against the shimmering lights of the town. I was alone on the water, and I was so close to the cave. I dragged my palms down my face. I knew I wouldn't get a wink of sleep if I didn't at least check, and besides, now was the perfect opportunity. With no patrol boats crawling around, hidden by the darkness of the open sea, I anchored the boat as close as I could to the tiny, rocky beach at the cave's mouth, and splashed my way to the entrance, wincing as the icy water soaked into my sneakers. Standing on the gravel beach, I fumbled in my pocket. I was relieved to feel the clink of my key ring against my fingertips. Pulling it out, I pressed the button on the small flashlight that I kept clipped to the ring, and its weak beam cut through the darkness ahead of me. The small comfort that the light afforded me was dashed, as I heard scuffling from behind some large stones just a few feet ahead. My hand shook as I pointed the flashlight toward the source of the sound, and I stumbled back as a figure moved from behind the rocks. "Dad?" It had come out as a question, but as my disbelieving eyes flickered over the man in front of me, I was sure it was him. He was much older and far scruffier than he was when I'd last seen him, and he was still somewhat obscured by the shadows of the cave entrance. Still, I felt certain it was my dad. My heart leapt in elation, and I stumbled forward, slipping on the loose, wet gravel in my haste to embrace him. To my dismay, however, he started backwards, jerking out of the way of my open arms and slipping backwards, further into the cave. "There's no time, Carter." His voice was rough and strangled with disuse. "What?" He jerked his head backwards, indicating for me to follow him into the cave. I was so stunned by the strangeness of the interaction, by his sudden appearance and by his form retreating further into the darkness of the cave, that I followed without question. At that moment, it seemed like the only thing I could do. While his strides seemed quick and practiced, mine were rendered unsteady by the slick rock beneath me. He was still just ahead of me, just on the edge of my flashlight beam, but I had to pick up my halted, slippery pace to keep up with him as he continued to press on. "There's no time for reunions yet. I promise you, all of that will come in due time. But for now, I just need you to trust me." I was out of breath from our rapid pace, and though questions burned at the tip of my tongue, I wasn't able to vocalize them. The walls of the cave seemed slightly closer now, and my claustrophobia built into a lump in my throat, further blocking any attempt at communication I might make. "Years ago, the day I disappeared, I discovered a ritual site in the back of this cave," he explained as I staggered onward. "I don't remember what happened between then and 2 days ago. All I know is that I woke up here, with the ritual site glowing around me. I managed to find out the date from a passing boat. I don't know what happened, Carter, and I'm so sorry for leaving you for so long. But I do know that something is happening tonight, in this cave. I don't know what will happen if we don't stop it, but I don't want to find out, and I need your help." My mind was spinning with all the new information. He was still moving quickly in front of me, and stunned as I was, I lost my focus for a moment, and with it, my footing. My toe caught a small ledge on the ground beneath me, and I tripped, halting for a moment as I caught myself on my hands, scraping myself badly. However, it was not the pain that I noticed. The moment I had stopped, so had my dad. I stood slowly and took another step forward. So did he. I took a few more and he followed, but each time I stopped, he would too. It was as though he was determined to stay exactly as far from me as he was currently, just close enough to still be visible, but far enough to avoid the full power of my feeble flashlight beam. My blood ran cold. "Carter, come on," he said gruffly. Urgency, and something else that I know now to have been hunger, distorting his voice. "We have to hurry." That had been the point all along, hadn't it? To hurry me along, feed me lots of information all at once, give me no time to think. But now I was thinking. It was a plausible story, sure. My dad had been a curious man, and if he had seen the same opportunity I had, it was certainly possible that he would have tried to explore the cave as well. An anthropologist would have been intrigued by a perceived ritual site, and if something supernatural had indeed happened, it could explain his disappearance in the manner that he described. But something still bugged me. As I mentioned, my dad had always loved people. Now the first person he's seen in 11 years, even if those 11 years were a timeless blur, arrives at the cave and he spends no time greeting them, not even when the person is his own son. It didn't seem right. I tensed my hand around my keychain and, in one smooth motion, moved forward and focused the pale beam right on the figure in front of me. He jolted back as quickly as he could, but it wasn't fast enough. Not this time, and I finally saw him for what he was. Sure, he looked a lot like my dad, an aged up, banged up version of him, tailor-made to look as if he'd been unconscious in a cave for 11 years. An excellent copy, but I could also see why he'd been avoiding the light. In the detail afforded by the dim light, I could see the way his limbs seemed slightly too long, the way his shoulders didn't quite slot in their sockets, the way his teeth seemed just a bit too large for his mouth, and his eyes. Christ. They were the same color as my dad's, sure, but that is where the resemblance ended. They were empty, glassy, artificial, like the false eyes they stick in taxidermied animals, a poor imitation of the real thing. My dad was an anthropologist, and I know a person when I see one. This wasn't. The next few minutes are a blur in my memory. I remember sprinting back in the direction I'd come, slipping and sliding on the algae-coated stone beneath me. I could hear him chasing me, and worse, I could hear more of them behind me, scampering through the cave on what sounded to me like wet, slippery clawed hands and feet. As I ran, I kicked rocks backwards, hoping they would slow the creature's progress. I guess it must have worked, because the next thing I knew, I had flung myself into my boat and gunned it away from the island, not even bothering to look back and see how close an escape it had been. This brings me to today. As you might expect, I didn't sleep a wink. I spent the whole night researching, trying to figure out exactly what it was that happened to me. From what I've put together, it is likely that the first part of the story I was told was true. My dad probably did see the cave, seek the opportunity to explore it under the cover of darkness, and venture deep into it, hoping to discover a hidden anthropological treasure. But I don't think he found anything human in that horrible place, and I am certain now, even more than I was, that he is dead. Do you know where the name Morgan's Isle comes from? I certainly didn't. Before my midnight research session, I had always assumed that it was just named after an important figure in the area, like Jacksonville or Pennsylvania in the US. It turns out, though, that this is not the case. I doubt that many of the current residents of Arfurter would pick up on the name's significance. Hardly any of them are Welsh, and fewer still are old enough or rooted enough in the area to remember any of the legends attached to it. As it turns out, a Morgan or Morgan is a Welsh term for a creature that entices men into its lair, usually with its beauty or enchanting voice, in order to drown or consume them. In the US, we might refer to this creature as a siren. I believe that it is likely these creatures that I encountered in the cave last night, and if this is the case, there is no doubt in my mind that they are responsible for the disappearances of a number of visitors and locals alike over the years, including my poor father. As I am typing this, I am sitting on the back porch of the old vacation home. My flight leaves tomorrow morning, and I have one more night in the grubby little inn up the road, but something called me back here, telling me to look out over the darkened sea one last time. I sincerely hope that it wasn't the sound that brought me here, that beautiful, achingly sorrowful timbre that echoes up the bluffs and draws me closer, sounding so much more melodic than it did all those years ago. Leaning in, I can see the flecks of light on the water again, tipping hypnotically up and down as waves roll by beneath them. I feel sick to my stomach. My dad was wrong. They aren't anything like diamonds. Looking at them now, I can see them for what they are. Fake, dead, empty, like taxidermy. The below is the story as I told it to the authorities. They did not believe me. I went to the media, and again, they didn't believe me. So to you, Reddit, I write to you so that you may hear my story. Please, tell the world because I seem to not be able to. Beware of clouds that do not move, for they hide those who wear us. I splash my face with water and look up at the mirror to see a face far older than me staring right back. I hated looking in the mirror lately. 31 years old with wrinkling eyes and graying hair. Were my blue eyes getting even more pale? I asked myself as I stared vacantly at them. This is why I wear sunglasses everywhere. This bloody job is aging me. I splashed my face again, washing my tired eyes. I put my glasses back on and wiped the water out of my short facial hair. In the mirror, I eyed the dirty bathroom behind me. The orange light of a soon-to-set sun pushed its way through the frosted glass windows and illuminated the body fluid-stained bathroom, a color that was reminiscent of an anxiety-ridden Sunday sunset. Fitting, because on the other side of the door was a job I hated. I didn't used to hate my job. In fact, I used to love it. But it wears on you, you know, being a doctor. But what breaks you is being sent to the middle of nowhere, away from your friends and your girlfriend, to a town that shrinks year on year, with more missing people than there are actually people. I sighed and walked over to the window. I tilted it downwards to peer out into the town, flat as the eye can see. Brown sand and streets stretching between a bunch of old, unattractive buildings before the desert begins. I used to romanticize living in an isolated town out in nature. Good for the soul, I thought it'd be. Turns out, not all nature is great for the soul. Staring out into a flat plain of sand, as far as the eye can see, doesn't stir up the endorphins. The sand isn't reminiscent of exotic beaches or mystical dunes. It's more akin to the dirt you'd find in a vacant lot behind an old motel riddled with drugs, gangsters, and prostitutes. Like the kind of place you'd find in this dump. I thought to myself. I sighed again. I looked down as I pulled my wallet out of my pocket. I opened it to reveal 2 Polaroid photos. One of the pictures was of my girlfriend, Kyra, and I at a wine farm back home. I had sunglasses on, a button up top, and a glass of wine in my hand. I was actually happy in that photograph. Your actions define you, but your inner monologue shapes you, Kyra would say to me. I nodded and looked up. I could see my apartment from the small opening in this tilted window. It was on the fire-on side of town. At least rent is cheap, I thought to myself. Gotta improve the inner monologue. Of course, rent was cheap though. No one stays long enough for a landlord to even bother driving up the prices like they do in the cities. Most people just get up and leave one day, never to say goodbye to anyone, never to contact their family again. It leaves the housing market right open. I looked down at the other Polaroid. The boys and I at my best friend's wedding, dressed to the nines. We all had crystal tumbler with an expensive scotch in our hands. The boys had all planned a trip to see me this weekend. I told them not to bother. There was nothing to do here. Drinking beers and seeing you is all we need, Jordan replied. Don't be like that. We're excited for this, Liam responded. Chris just sent a gif of a little boy throwing a rock at another boy's head. I laughed, and so they continued with their plan to visit. I knew I should be excited to see them, but the anxiety of getting through this work week was too powerful. Don't be like that, I muttered to myself as I looked through the window into the sky. The cloud was still there. It had come over during the weekend and covered half of the sky. It happens, one of the locals said. Yeah, it happens, another responded. It was the second one I had seen this year, a cloud that stays still for however many days and then disappears overnight. I was at the local watering hole when this one arrived, and by watering hole, I mean the pavement outside the liquor store. That's where you drank in this dump. You bought a 6-pack and went and sat on the pavement drinking beers. I looked at my watch. Thursday, 17 hours, 47 minutes. 12 hours and 13 minutes and I can leave. I thought. Monologue, I could imagine Kyra saying. I forced a smile. 12 hours and 13 minutes, and I get to leave. Good enough. Dr. Dan? Liz said after knocking on the door. Yeah, I responded, fumbling to put the Polaroids back in the wallet, and that back into my pocket. Do you have a moment? I opened the door, exposing a long corridor that only half the lights working and 2 bulbs flashing intermittently. A pained groan drifted through the hall from one of the ward rooms. The hospital was far too big for a town this small. The 2-story U-shaped building was ideal for the town back in the 70s, but the declining population had made the size of this place redundant. A clinic in a shipping container might have been too much for this place. A moment. I have a few. What's going on? More of a situation. A gentleman in the waiting room. He just walked in and sat down. He hasn't said anything other than that he wants to see a doctor. What's the problem? Is he hurt? I asked as we began walking. I peered into each room as we passed. Broken windows peered down into a dusty courtyard in the middle of the U-shaped building. Curtains missing from railings and old blood stains gone uncleaned. More rooms empty than occupied. There is no problem. That's the problem. He seems fine. No signs of physical injury. No temperature. Name? I asked. He didn't say. I asked. I've tried collecting patient history, just like you've asked me to. but he won't talk other than asking to see a doctor. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. You always do a great job, I said. Liz was the best nurse in this place. She grew up here. Her fellow nurses hated her because her father owned the liquor store. That made them the richest family in town. It also made them the #1 reason for hospital admissions. But Liz truly wanted to help. This wasn't just a paycheck for her. She always wanted to be a doctor. But her father couldn't afford med school, despite his liquor empire. She was smart, though. Very smart. This town is smaller than my high school. Surely you know his name. You grew up here, Liz, I said. It's the man from over Bracken Hill. The one in the caravan. Ah, that recluse, I thought as we passed another room. I peered and saw a tall but skinny man covered by a bedsheet, standing and looking out the window. Only his faint, dark silhouette could be seen through the white sheet. Drug-induced psychosis. He was admitted because he went around town telling people he's seen God come down from the heavens and walk among us. Where does one even get drugs in a place like this? Please check on Mr. Swart later, I said to Liz. The medication he was on was helping. He shouldn't even be here, but there's no other place within days for him to go. Small hospitals like this, we have to do a bit of everything. Of course. We passed one last room before reaching the stairwell. I turned to look at the closed door. I shook my head. MRI. Where is that administrator? I asked. Still hasn't been since his tender ploy was discovered. Liz replied. I fondled a small vial in my pocket. The administrator had friends within the Minister of Health and managed to get a budget increase for the hospital a few months back. I figured we could hire an extra cleaner or two, fix some windows, maybe even get new linen for the beds. Instead, he bought an MRI, an extremely high-end MRI, incredibly powerful, for ultra-high resolution scans, the type you would find in a prestigious university research laboratory. And now there's one sitting out in the desert. Who would approve an MRI for a hospital in a town this small? I thought when I watched it get installed. Well, that was exactly it. We were never meant to get the MRI. The administrator's friend or relative or whoever was simply meant to be paid for it, and that was going to be that. But the authorities received a tip-off, and to quell the rumors, the administrator used the corrupt approval to actually get a bloody MRI. It was installed, and the administrator never returned to work. Haven't seen him since. I still get paid at the end of every month, so I couldn't care less about him, but the thought of a machine worth 10 times more than the annual GDP of this town sitting behind those doors disgusted me. Couple of months back, a child from a nearby farm was dropped off. He was attacked by starved dogs owned by a couple too poor to feed themselves, let alone their dogs. The child bled to death in my arms. The couple locked up and dogs put down, all because of poverty. I pulled out the vial from inside my pocket and rolled it in my hand. Prozac. It's only circumstantial, I heard Jordan's voice in my head. He knew nothing. He worked for a major corporate, cushy job, easy life. He didn't understand the need for exogenous help. You're the strongest guy I know. Remember why you're doing what you do. Your job has meaning, worth. People have broken into tears whilst thanking you for doing what you do. You're making a difference in people's life. I just increased shareholder value for a bunch of old fat men. He had said months ago. He and the boys were trying to cheer me up over a beer on a rare weekend when I went back to my hometown to visit. Yeah, try to find some worth amongst spreadsheets. Now that's depressing, Liam had said. He was an accountant, and like most accountants, he both bragged about it and hated it. Despite me agreeing with him, Jordan's intentions were pure. He was the one who, in high school, always wanted to help people. All the teachers told him to become a psychologist or a teacher, but he chose to go into business. I did it for the money, so that I can provide for my family. I have the family. Now I'm just waiting for the money. He would shout whilst looking at the cost of homes. All right, George, I said as I slipped the vial back into my pocket. Let's try it your way. I hated the numbness of how those pills made me feel. It was good for some days, but bad for most. Liz and I left, making our way down the stairwell as someone screamed in pain from down the hall. Mrs. Moses. That was common. I've been reading the documents. I know how to turn the MRI on now, Liz said. You must be bored, I said. I just figured we might need to use it someday. If it's here, we might as well use it and help others, she said. The department said that they're coming to remove it one of these days. I responded. They said that months ago, but they're so bloody inept that they can't even send a team to pick up a piece of tech that the rest of the country desperately needs. Couldn't even run a bath, I thought to myself, whilst thinking of the health department. Monologue, I imagined Kyra's voice. I was doing my best to catch myself in the midst of negative, angry thoughts. Sorry, babe, I whispered. There he is, Liz said. The man sat upright on a plastic chair in the hospital's lobby. His clothes were as dirty as he was. He had long, blonde hair, or at least it used to be. It was sandier than the parking lot outside. He turned his neck slowly to look at me. I was met with wide eyes, exhausted of emotion. It was I who was looking into a shell. Here's Dr. Dan, Liz said. No one called me by my surname. I wish they did, but I felt too bad to demand that of the nurses. Jordan had said I needed to be more assertive, but I had to save my emotions for other battles. Hi there, I said to the man. Behind the dirt-crusted exterior, there was a tinge of familiarity in that face. Hi, Dan, he spoke. Shane? I asked, finally recollecting where I knew him from. I haven't seen you since... high school, yeah. Yeah, didn't you leave in grade 10 because of... I stopped myself there as the memories came flooding in. Drugs, he said softly. Shane was expelled for selling weed to other students. Everyone knew, but no one told on him until at someone's 16th he brought meth. Even teenagers know when to draw the line sometimes. Yeah, I said awkwardly. Anyway, what's the problem, Shane? How can we help? I asked. He sat there quietly, staring out the front window. Shane? I saw him. Sorry, I asked. My uncle. And? I asked patiently. I wanted to tell him to hurry up. I know Jordan would've. He's a good man, but he's assertive enough to get the ball rolling when he needs. Don't you remember? From school? I shook my head. I wasn't cool in school, and wasn't at the party that got him expelled. The meth, a girl, Sammy, from another school, took some home with her. She died. My uncle made the stuff, and he went to jail after I got expelled. And now he is out of jail. Do you think he wants to hurt you? I asked. If he does, we can call the police. No. He was killed in prison. Not too long ago. Last week, actually. We buried him out there, in the sand. It's his land, he said, pointing past the patrol station opposite the hospital, Bracken Hill. The sunset fell behind the small hill and cast a shadow over us as darkness set upon this dust bowl. I dug the grave myself whilst my mother cried. I put him in there myself. You sure it wasn't someone else? I asked. No, I saw him outside my window. He was peering in, his eyes black with white irises. He smiled at me. His skin was tight. His eyes looked up to the windows of the secondary floor. My eyes followed him. A tall, pale ghost stared at us from one of the windows. Liz, please go check on Mr. Swartz. I instructed the nurse. My apologies, Shane. That's just a patient. He likes wearing his bedsheet. Where's Dr. Simon? Liz asked, checking her watch. That guy wouldn't help anyway, even if he did arrive. I complained. Simon. He was the resident doctor here, but when he was actually here, he didn't even do anything. But at least he would usually be here. Today, he didn't even bother showing up, so it was up to myself and Liz to run the show. I should pick up the phone and call him. In fact, I should pick up the phone and phone the department and tell them that Dr. Simon has been getting kickbacks from the previous administrator. He's the only guy in town that can afford a first-hand car, let alone that sports car he drives around these sand roads. The phone lines hardly ever worked anyway. The municipality would fix them, and then someone would steal the copper. Rinse and repeat. The usual. I wouldn't flog him off anyway. Even if they did work, I needed him to sign off this bloody post in a few months, so that I could go home and get a real job. Monologue. I sighed. A job that I enjoyed more. Liz took her leave to go upstairs. If you feel you're in danger, you should go to the police, I said to Shane. He shook his head. A soft, pained moan sounded from the nearest ward. I made a mental note to check on the patient. Fair enough, I said as I recalled when my bicycle went missing. I loved riding my bike. It was the closest I got to feeling like I was getting away from this place. Woke up on Monday after a long call and the entire bicycle, including the bike rack, was gone. I called the policeman. Yes, the single policeman, and told him about it. He said it was a small town and it would show up. It had not since, so I took the boring 10-minute trek home every day. It happened when the cloud arrived, Shane said. On Saturday? Well, on Saturday evening, my motorbike went missing. I love that bike. I would dig and make ramps for it up on the hill. I went looking for it and saw my uncle's grave had been dug up. Sunday night. I'm looking out the window and there he is. He just walked off with his friends. His friends? Shane pointed at Mr. Swart under his bed sheet in the window. Not that I noticed. He was staring right down at us. I looked at the sheet-covered man and back at Shane. It clicked. Shane, are you making and selling drugs up there, over the hill? He nodded. He sold bad meth to Mr. Swartz. He takes after his uncle, and now there's probably some sort of epidemic of meth-induced psychosis. I should have told him to go screw himself, but I decided against it. I have an oath to uphold. I went to the nurse's station to grab a clipboard to begin taking a full history. I scoured around the station and couldn't find a single metal clipboard, only the wooden ones. I hated the wooden clipboards. My handwriting is terrible enough, with those poorly maintained pieces of garbage worsening it. I grabbed one and sat beside Shane. Alright, first of all, I paused. I eyed the dirty parking lot outside. Not a single car. Shane, who dropped you off? I walked. From Bracken Hill? That must have taken a while. I left on Sunday. Sunday? I can run up there in probably an hour. Walk in maybe 2. How did it take you 4 days? I got lost. He said with a tear coming up his eye. It streaked down his dirty face, leaving the only clean line upon his gob. The idiot was so high he wandered in the desert for over 4 days. I grabbed the bridge of my nose with my thumb and forefinger and sighed. We need to get you fluids ASAP. Mr. Swart isn't in his room, Liz said. I turned around. She stood behind me on the stairs. What do you mean? I can see him in the window, I said as I peered up. The broken window from which he stared down at us from was empty. Only darkness lay behind the sharp glass. The sun was deep below Bracken Hill now, and the moon shrouded behind the still cloud. I only just noticed how dark the hospital had become. He was gone. A woman screamed in pain, loudly. It echoed down the halls. I slammed down the clipboard. Liz, admit him now that he's talking. Check him for dehydration. Get him fluids. After that, go find Mr. Swartz. I'll go check on that screaming patient. And where is Dr. Simon? I ran up the stairs in the dark. I opened the door to the half-lit corridor and looked around, trying to figure out which way the scream had come from. The flickering lights in the corridor to my left briefly illuminated a blackened foot entering a room at the end of the corridor. I flinched slightly at the sight, but just figured that it was Mr. Swartz. The scream came from the other side of the hospital, so I made my way straight on. My immediate destination was a light switch. This bloody dump hadn't even figured out automatic lighting yet. I walked across the main corridor connecting the hospital to the other side of the U-shape. At the end of the corridor, I fiddled on the on wall in the dark for a light switch when I saw something that made the hairs on my neck stand up. A dark liquid was smeared all over the floor. I've seen enough of that substance to know what it is, light or dark. I reached into my lab coat and grabbed my Leatherman. Pris had given it to me years ago. All men should have a Leatherman. That's why I didn't get one for Jordan and Liam. Bloody corpos, Chris said with a giggle back then. In a hospital, anything can happen. Someone could have ripped open their stitches, falling out of their bed when getting up for the toilet. Unfortunately, I didn't know of anyone in the hospital who currently had stitches, and I had only ever seen this much blood once before. Oh God. I pulled out my phone and immediately sent a text to Kyra. I love you, babe. Keeping my hand in my pocket with the knife flipped out of the Leatherman, I slowly creeped down the hallway. I shouldn't have been scared. A doctor should rush to help patients, but the corridor was dark. The scream was blood-curdling, and now the floor a mess. I used my phone as a torch. As I passed rooms, I could hear patients quietly sobbing as I, myself, began to realize the type of blood trail that I was following. This was no blood drip trail. Someone with severe bleeding had crawled through here, or worse, dragged. My stomach dropped. I immediately ducked into the nearest room. I tried to steady my breath. I did not know if I could follow the trail. "Don't be like that," Liam said in my head. "Well, screw you, Liam. Scariest thing that's ever happened to you is a formula breaking in Excel." I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. "We tried to stop them." My head snapped towards the voice. An old lady in the bed of the room I pulled into. Dark skin, wrinkled and leathery from years in the desert sun, lay in bed under direct view of the cloud above from her window. She coughed twice before lifting a weak arm from her bed and pointing to the cloud. "The elders tried. We thought we did. Back up on the farm months ago. I offered them my own daughter. They put her on and left, but they've come back." "What the?" I asked. I didn't have time for geriatric ramblings. I turned around and made my way out the door. Liquid dripped to the floor from the last room at the end of the corridor. I could hear the dripping. Slowly drops fell to the floor. I creeped further ahead, forcing my legs to move. I approached the end room and turned into it, only to find a similar scene to what I had seen in my first few months of being here. I went white with shock as I remembered the call. Up at a farm, 30 minutes drive from here. A lady on a phone screaming for a doctor. Apparently, a severe burn victim was seen walking down the main hallway. No, she was wrong. Not burns. The girl had collapsed and died by the time I had arrived, and what I saw then was the same as what I saw now. Hanging from the wall by metal bolts through his hands was the flayed body of a slim man. Lips and eyelids as removed as his skin. Exposed muscles still twitched as his nerves sent pain signals shooting through the body and mind. "Oh Lord," I said softly, defaulting to my old religious habits. Strange. I had only been to church once in the past 12 years, and it was in this town's very church. I left early because it was not what I had remembered. It was strange. Their beliefs completely different to what I had remembered learning. My hands were trembling. I needed to let the man down. If I call the police, he will only come when it suits him. The whole town is unreliable. I stepped forward to try and remove the corpse from the wall when something from the window caught my eye. Black silhouettes of tall, slender men moving down the corridor on the other side of the hospital. They were prowling through the dark building. I could see them through the window as they moved between the open doors. Liz was too short and stout for that to be her. My mind jumped to Satanists or some murderous cult. I was in danger. I needed to help Liz, but what could I do? I turned to the flayed corpse. I wanted to apologize for not being able to help, but its eyes, they turned to look at me. It opened its mouth. "Sky, cloud," it muttered as it eyed me. I turned and ran. I sprinted to the nearest bathroom and slammed the door shut, cowering in a cubicle which I frantically tried locking it, but failed, for the locks were no longer there. Just empty holes in the wooden door where the screws used to be. That was new. I put down the toilet seat, sat down and tried to calm myself. I felt a vibration on my arm. My watch. High heart rate. Your heart rate rose above 167 BPM, while you seemed to be... I stopped looking at it. My head plunged into my hands. I looked and reached into one of my pockets. The vial. Prozac. I shakily opened the bottle, emptied the contents into my hand. This would be easier, I thought. Easier than being flayed by a bunch of murderous cultists. Inner monologue. Don't be like that. Seeing you is all we need. I carefully put them back in the vial and slipped them into my pocket. I wanted to see my friends, my girlfriend. I couldn't give in. I started breathing in deeply and poured all of the pills back into the vial. A cold chill swept up my neck as the sound of scratching caught my attention. The window behind me was tilted open. I slowly turned around to look out of the window. Slowly crept a long, pitch-black arm ended by a hand with 3 long fingers and sharp claws. The arm started to bend and move down, as if about to grab me. I am a doctor, and it was my professional opinion that that was no human appendage. My mouth dropped and I tried to scream, but I had no voice. Shock had grabbed hold. I fell to my feet and scrambled out of the cubicle. The arm began to flail wildly as a low, guttural growl sounded out from behind the glass. I crawled until I could find my feet and stumbled out of the bathroom and into the corridor. I stumbled back into the old woman's room. I need answers. She had them. She was under her covers, grumbling, sobbing, and gurgling. Ma'am? Ma'am, what are those things? The grumbling, sobbing, and gurgling stopped. The bedsheet raised into the air slowly, like a ghost rising from its slumber until its head hit the roof. 2 white lights shone at me from behind the sheet. A black hand reached out from under the sheet and pulled it away, throwing it to the floor. In its other hand, the half-mangled corpse of the old lady hung, partially devoured by a ceiling-tall creature, with glowing white eyes and a grin filled with teeth. 2 arms, 2 legs, like a human with an enlarged head with 2 small white eyes. I screamed and grabbed the nearest thing to me. A bedpan. I threw it at the beast and it slammed into its skull with a soft thud. The metal pan stuck there and then slowly started to retreat into the beast. The tall, blackened creature shivered and oscillated as the metal broke down and was redistributed throughout its body. I shouted and pulled over a wardrobe. It fell into the beast, knocking it into the broken glass window. It shattered what was left of the window and fell through into the courtyard below. I heard it hit the ground with a thud. The beast let out a grandiose howl, one that I could feel in my gut. It was as if 1,000 ships in a dock signaled their horns at once from the gut of an alien beast. Thank the Lord maintenance was too lazy to bolt those wardrobes down. I needed to find Liz and leave. There was at least one more of these things. Liz? I shouted as I turned and ran. Liz, we have to leave. I sprinted to the nearest stairwell. The lights flickered. Darkness and light. Darkness and light. I ran down the stairs and into the main foyer. Shane was still on his chair. He just stared outside, straight ahead. I remembered where I was in the desert, why it took me so long to get here. Not now, Shane, I snapped. Liz! I shouted again as I frantically searched for her. I wasn't actually in the desert. I was with them, behind the cloud, Shane said. Goosebumps crawled across my skin and I stopped my frantic search. Shane slowly stood up and took his shirt off, revealing red, fresh scars across his torso. He looked like a poorly sewn shirt with huge hems around his shoulders, down his torso and up his arms. He unbuckled his jeans and they fell to the floor. His legs were the same. He was freshly sutured together, freshly sewn. They tried me on. I was too short. They put me back. But you, Mr. Swartz, my uncle, you are the right size. They can squeeze. He simply stared at me with his mouth open and a vacant stare, as if his soul slowly leaked from his eyes. I looked into the parking lot, and the one that had fallen out the window was hunched over an aluminum bench. I used to sit there to eat my lunch. Its body was oscillating and ululated gutturally as it began to absorb the bench itself, its skin beginning to reflect the flickering lights of the floor above. I turned my head to the stairs, and next to them, the door to our supply closet creaked open. A human hand creeped out from behind and beckoned me closer. I moved quickly to it, Leatherman in hand. As I approached, it grabbed my hand and pulled me in. I had to stop myself from stabbing Liz as she slammed the door shut and locked it. "What in God's green earth is happening?" the nurse asked me, tears spilling from her eyes. I saw Mr. Swartz. His eyes were glowing, and he was eating another patient. His head split in half from his mouth to forehead so that he could swallow her head whole. Oh God. "They eat humans and metal," I said. "And wear us," Liz said through tears. Mr. Swartz's skin tore open, and I saw something beneath it. I looked around the supply room and saw nothing of help until I saw Liz's keychain on her hips. "Come with me," I said as I grabbed her hand, pulled her out of the supply room and up the stairwell. "Unlock this door." "Why?" "Just unlock it," I shouted. She fumbled through her keys to find the right one when I noticed him, Mr. Swartz, at the end of the corridor. He was on the roof, belly facing the floor and arms and legs contorted backwards to hold on to the ceiling. His white eyes glowed as he began to crawl towards us. "Hurry," I said. Mr. Swartz ululated with deep growls and clicks as he clawed along the roof towards us. Picking up pace, his face split open down in the middle and exposed a head filled with hundreds of teeth. "Hurry," I shouted as I launched my knife at the creature. It hit the roof-climbing beast right where its head split open, and it screamed. It faltered for a slight moment and gave Liz just enough time to unlock the door. I grabbed the handle myself and swung the door open as the crawling beast reached us. It dropped from the roof, and I narrowly dodged the creature before shoving Liz inside the room. I slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. I flipped a light switch, and white light lit up the only well-lit room in this place. The white cylindrical tube of the MRI machine glowed under the bright light above. Clean, pearly white tiles shone. "Get in the control room," I asserted as one of the beasts started banging against the outside. "Liz, I need you to show me what you've learned." Liz opened the door and went into the control room. "Begin turning it on." "Why?" "No questions, Liz. Just do it." She booted up a computer, and I could hear the clacks of keyboard keys through the radio used to talk to me. I slowly walked to the other side of the room. Next to the MRI, I unclipped my belt and removed it from my pants. "On my signal," I said as I watched the door handle fall to the floor. The creatures were absorbing the metal inside. "Turn it on." The door creaked open, and Mr. Swartz's head peered around the door. His bright white eyes were wide and wild. He smiled with a toothy grin as his unnaturally long neck kept extending out from behind the door. With a croak, he kicked the door open, and behind him stood another one of those beasts, not wearing any skin. I shivered as I stared at them. I held my belt out like a whip, as if it would help. God, I wish I still had my knife. Why did I throw it? Come on, try me on, I shouted. They both croaked and growled as they ducked to stand into the room. The one without skin stepped forward and approached. Its hand split down the middle and a metallic bone protruded from it, with multiple tool-like ends. They all appeared to be some sort of surgical scalpel device. Warm liquid ran down my legs. I held my belt buckle up as they approached. Full power, Liz. 7T. The belt buckle was ripped from my hand and slammed against the magnetic resonance imagery machine. I heard a second thud and stared at my knife, now stuck to the MRI, covered in black gore. The creature slipped and fell, grabbing onto tiles and gripping the floor. They groaned, and their croaks began to turn into screeches, and their screeches into loud, thunderous howls. I watched as something with multiple spikes began to press its way out of Mr. Swartz's belly. It ripped through and slammed itself against the MRI. A bicycle gear. I shook my head in realization. Thieves, I shouted. The creatures screeched and cried as bits of metal began ripping out of their skin, tearing them apart. Their claws peeled back and their grip on the floor gave in. The scalpel-like bone of the unskinned one snapped and flew at the magnetic machine. It sounded like 1,000 marbles thrown in a metal bucket. The racket was unbearably loud. The unskinned alien's grip failed. The entire beast was ripped from the ground and slammed into the machine. It squealed like a pig being thrown in a grinder. Mr. Swartz's wearer's grip gave in next, and it too flew into the MRI. It slammed onto its alien companion. Stuck on the front of the MRI, they roared in pain, and the quintessential sound of bones snapping, skin tearing, and metal creaking as it bends filled the room. With a loud pop, their skin gave out, and black gore sprayed the inside of the MRI machine as thousands of pieces of metal burst inside the magnetic mass. The MRI shut down and I fell to my knees. In my rearview mirror, I watched as the cloud, uniform and unbreaking, slowly sunk behind the horizon of a rising sun. I looked at the piece of paper folded on my passenger seat. I smiled. Dr. Simon, I shouted as he opened the door to his house. If I didn't sign an oath, I'd kill you. He reeked of booze and his eyes were dilated. I shoved a piece of paper onto his chest. Sign this, or I go to the department. He was so high, he didn't even realize I was threatening him. He signed the papers and proceeded to pass out on his porch immediately after. I had offered to take Liz with me, but she wanted to get her family out first. I wasn't staying for another minute. I packed my bags, threw all that I owned in that town in my car, and I left. Now driving, I reached into my pocket as I drove away and felt the vial of antidepressants. I smiled as I threw them out of the window, for happiness was ahead of me. My name is Deputy Lancaster in the town of Redacted, New England. For the sake of the privacy of not only the victims and their families, but also for the sake of their privacy, therefore I'm going to remove any identifiable information from their files. When I first heard of this ritual, I thought it was just a child's game, but for teens, similar to how teens call hide-and-seek manhunt. But after looking at the victims and the growing body count, I realized this is something else. In August 2020, a young Caucasian male by the name of Nicholas Redacted in the town of Redacted, New England, was found dead in his apartment. There were no visible wounds on his body, however his face was a pale red color. The coroner and doctors couldn't find any cause of death. It just appeared as if he suddenly died. Nicholas was a healthy young man around 20 years of age, and so we couldn't understand what happened. In his apartment, there was a room with the window boarded up and 6 full-body mirrors all covered in some strange black smoke. 2 months later, a young girl by the name of Amy, redacted, was reported missing by her parents. Me, along with another officer, were sent to investigate, and we later found her body in an abandoned cabin with a single door and no windows, similar to Nicholas. In the cabin, there were 6 full-body mirrors. However, this time, one of the mirrors was shattered to pieces. I asked her friends about this, but they couldn't give me any information on why she would have those mirrors in her home. Her death appeared similar to Nicholas, a healthy young girl around 15 years of age that suddenly dropped dead. A week later, another young man who lived alone with his single mother was found dead. Similar to the first 2 victims, there was a single room that his mother claimed he started to spend a lot of time in. The room had no windows, a single door, and again, 6 full-body mirrors. However, this time they were weird strangulation marks around his right finger, as if there had been a string tied tightly around it. Something was going on in this town, and now all cops were on red alert. We initially assumed there were some new drugs on the black market that were causing this type of reaction. Or maybe this had something to do with COVID. However, both roads proved inconclusive. We tried to get the CDC involved, but with their hands full, and with all subjects being healthy, they chose not to get involved, to my frustration. I had all 3 of the victims drug tested, however nothing appeared. A few days later, another young girl was reported to us. This time she was found alive, but she seemed to be comatose. When she finally woke up, she was in a vegetative state and kept muttering a single word over and over again: Hunt. Me and my fellow officers tried to talk to her, but all attempts proved useless. Later, after searching her room for drugs, I came across this strange letter. Do you have a loved one that died before their time? Some past lover, or someone who you never got to tell goodbye to? Or maybe you're seeking closure for a murdered family member. Contacting the dead is a very rare ability. In fact, only 1 out of every 1 million human beings will ever be gifted with such power. And of those, only about 10% will ever master the ability to the point where they can control who or what they see. I'm talking about dropping the veil to the other side, going through the plane that separates the living from the dead. My father was a part of a secret society known as Redacted, of people who could talk to the dead. I'm sharing this because after years of trying to be like my father, I realized that more people should have access to this power, and it shouldn't be hoarded from the public by men in dark rooms wearing trench coats. Now I know most of you won't believe me, and the conditions to perform this ritual are so specific and so anal that if you mess up even a bit, you'll possibly end up somewhere where humans were never meant to go. I'm talking about a world where monsters and eldritch terrors exist, and if you are lucky enough to not be eaten, you'll most likely spend the rest of your life so traumatized with your mind split to pieces that you'll wish you were dead. Or maybe you'll get lost in your own hell. I'm talking about the subconscious of your mind, and you'll never wake up, no matter how many doctors or psychics try to help you. So please, I'm begging that if you try to perform this ritual, you must do so with extreme caution. Don't treat it like a joke. The exact conditions must be met, or else you'll be lost forever. This is the Deadman Hunt ritual. To start, you'll need all these objects: 6 mirrors, 6 full body mirrors, no more than 6, no less than 6, exactly 6. Don't mess around and try to use more mirrors than this. I've seen other kids of secret society members who thought it would be funny to use more mirrors, then required, and they were so stretched out that they became a vegetable and will remain that way for the rest of their lives. You'll understand what I mean in a moment. Next, you'll need a red string. The exact size of the red string isn't important, but I'll tell any newbies to witchcraft and magic to pick a red string that is at least 24 inches long. Think of this red string as your anchor. If at any point during this ritual you feel like you're not going to make it, use this red string to come back. Then you'll need exactly 6 candles, 1 for each mirror. The exact brand or type of candle isn't really important, but I would recommend each candle be a single wick candle. And last but not least, you'll need some sort of protective rune. If you're Christian, this might be a cross. If you're pagan, maybe some witch rune or something. If you're atheist, if you are, I don't see why you would even be attempting this ritual. Maybe it can be some sort of necklace or ring or something that holds sentimental value to you. However, the one thing it cannot be is a picture of the person you're trying to contact. Please use common sense when picking your protective rune, and don't be a dick. Spirits love to mess with people who think it's fun to play with them. You'll need a room with a single door, no windows. This can be a basement, or an attic, or even a bathroom. However, I would recommend that the room have enough space to at least stretch around in. If you don't have a room like that, then you can use a window, but it must be boarded up, and you must make sure that no, and I mean no, light can get through. There are some preconditions for this ritual that I like to call living like you are dead. You must do these 3 preconditions before performing this ritual. 1. You must not communicate with anyone living for 48 hours. The exact method of communication doesn't matter, so don't text, tweet, or call anyone. You must be completely cut off from living people. If you are shut in already, then this condition should be easy enough for you. 2. You must burn something that belonged to the person you're trying to contact, exactly 1 hour before performing this ritual. I know this might be hard, especially considering this ritual might not work the first or second time you attempt it, but the spirits, they demand sacrifice to contact the other side, so if you're not willing to sacrifice something, then please turn back now. The exact object doesn't matter. It can be a picture, or maybe even a gift. You have to smash it, or destroy it, or rip it up, then let it be consumed by fire. 3. The final precondition. If you've gone 48 hours without human contact, and you've burned the object of your desire, you might start to notice him, the weeping man. He's the one who holds the key to the veil. He's a handsome 6-foot-tall man with white hair and black eyes, and he's always crying. You must not, and I repeat, you must not speak to him. In fact, you should try everything within your power to ignore this man, for he is after your soul. If he gets you to speak to him, he will steal your soul. This man cannot physically harm you unless you give him the power to. He will weep, he will shout. He might even scream or break things or bring up the memories or even sound like your deceased one. But just know, he has no real power unless you give it to him. When he sees that you're not falling for his tricks, he'll simply say, I'll get you during the ritual, and leave you be until it's time. After you have finished all 3 of these preconditions, it's time for the ritual to truly begin. At exactly 11:58, you must begin the ritual. You'll have exactly 2 minutes to set everything up. You should wrap the red string around your left hand. Go to your room and set up each mirror. All 6 mirrors should be facing you at a 90-degree angle. You'll light each candle in front of the mirror and draw a circle around you in white chalk. The circle doesn't have to be perfect, but do your best to. After you finish setting up your mirrors, your red string, and you're standing in the center, it's time to begin. You'll only need to say these words: "I'm ready for the Deadman Hunt," and then it will begin. Now you must count. Count to the age of the person you're trying to reach, including after they die, of course. And once you're finished, repeat the phrase, "I'm ready for the Deadman Hunt." And then the game will begin. If the ritual is a success, all the mirrors will transform. You'll notice that your reflections are no longer reflecting you, but they still have your appearance. This is why it's important that you do exactly 6 mirrors. For you see, all these mirrors are pieces of your soul. The most common 5 will be a happy one, a crying one, an angry one, a scared one, and a loving one. These are pieces of your soul, your personality. You manifest it as fragments. Keep this in mind when judging their extreme behavior. But you might have noticed that there are 6 mirrors, but I only mentioned 5. Well, you see, this is why it's the Deadman Hunt. One of these images is not your soul, but the weeping man pretending to be you. To successfully complete the Deadman Hunt, you have exactly 1 hour to figure out which one is the weeping man. I know this might sound confusing to some of you, especially those who have very little knowledge. The weeping man is a folklore legend stemming from a small town in Italy. There once was a knight who fell in love with an aristocratic woman. He, however, was unable to be with her except for short, passionate moments. One day he went off to war, and when he came back, he learned she fell out of a window and died. The knight in response began to study black magic to try to bring her back to life. However, instead he was cursed by God to be the Knight of the Veil for all of eternity, never able to go to the afterlife in response to working with the devil. If at any point you feel like you can't win, you must pull the red ribbon from your wrist and you'll be transported back to the land of the living. Remember, though, that doing this ritual is a 1 in 100 chance, and it might not work the next time. If you've come this far, I doubt you'll turn back, even if you feel you're losing, but please, for the love of God, do. It's better to lose this game than to lose your life. When the game begins, you are free to roam around the house. You'll look outside and see that there are only black and gray fog and clouds, for you are no longer in your real home or your neighborhood. You're at the Vale. The game is pretty straightforward. Figuring out which piece of your soul is the weeping man. To accomplish this, you'll need to know yourself completely. You have to study all 6 versions of you. Know who you are. You can talk to them, ask them questions. The weeping man is an entity that has existed for centuries and has played his Deadman Hunt many times. He is a trickster that will most likely have spent the last 48 hours studying you. He'll know who you are, and he'll try to blend in well. Don't think asking simple questions like, "What is your happiest moment?" or "What's your girlfriend's name?" will trip him up. He will know these basic questions. To figure out which one is the weeping man, you have to be clever. There is no trick I can give you, as these are fragments of you, and therefore you have to know yourself. When you feel you have found the weeping man, you'll call all the versions of yourself to the room and say, "It's time to finish the hunt." All versions of you will line up by the mirror, and now you have to blow out the candle for the weeping man. It's very important that you don't be reckless. There isn't a limit to the number of guesses you get, but blowing out the candle to fragments of you will result in losing that piece of yourself. You'll lose a piece of yourself, your memories, your happiness, anger, or even love if you blow out the wrong candle. At first you'll feel fine, but you'll feel something is missing. A memory that makes you angry will suddenly be gone. Maybe the loved one who you came here for. Suddenly you won't feel that spark anymore. It's very important that you be careful when you guess. Losing a piece of yourself, it's still possible to move on. You can always form new love, but losing more than one, or even 4 pieces of yourself, and you'll most likely lose any motivation for living. So please, I hope I have stressed to you how important it is. But if you know yourself, if your heart is true, if you manage to see past the weeping man's trick, you blow out his candle and he will laugh. Instead of crying, he will laugh and he'll speak to you. Your hunt is over. Congratulations. The weeping man will want to shake your hand for your successful hunt. But this ritual isn't over yet. For you see, now it's time for his hunt to begin. The fragments of you will go back to the mirror after your hunt is over. These pieces of your soul will return to you, and the weeping man will take his normal form again. You can take a break. If you manage to defeat the game in less than an hour, then you can use that remaining time to rest, and when you're ready, it's time for the game to begin. This is the final round of the game. When you're ready to start, you'll stand up and look the weeping man in his cold black eyes and say, "I'm ready for your hunt to begin." You'll notice that your skin is much paler, and you also feel colder. Your hair might even have a bit of gray or white in it. You're so close. You're so close to the veil, to death, that you're in a half-living, half-dead state. Your heart might even start to beat much slower than normal. For you see, you're the dead man now, and now it's time for the weeping man to hunt you. This is your one and final chance to turn back now, because after the weeping man hunt begins, you won't be able to turn back. When the game begins, the weeping man will take you outside of your room and outside of the house or building you're in. The most common location will be a labyrinth or a corn maze or even a forest. It will seem familiar but also different to you. The reason for this is that some parts of it may be formed from fragments of your memory. The weeping man will call his steed, a pale gray horse with patches of skin missing that show its flesh and bone. He'll also grip his long black sword. Now is your time to run. You'll see a building in the far distance. The building will most likely be a church. You must now get past the weeping man's hunting ground and make it to the building to successfully survive the hunt. While the most animalistic part of you will try to run straight through it, this is a trap. The weeping man manifested his hunting ground just for you. Certain parts of the hunting ground will even seem familiar to you, as this purgatory of his design was created using parts of your memories. The rules of the hunt mean he must give you a chance to survive, but overall, this game will be in his favor. He might even have spirits there to torment and taunt you while you run, or even to help him in the chase. You must ignore your natural instinct and think rationally. Be calm and try to make it through the maze or forest in one piece. You should ignore any and all spirits that try to talk to you. They're there for the weeping man. They're not there to help you. For God's sake, don't fall for any of his tricks or traps. If he captures you, you'll be stabbed with his sword and you'll be dead. Whatever you do, remember that survival is your first priority. Your second priority is successfully making it to the building. Your red string will be useless. You and the weeping man are both on a time limit of 66 minutes. He has 66 minutes to hunt you, and you have 66 minutes to make it to the building. If you manage to survive the entire time, but you don't make it, then the ritual will be over, and you'll be transported back to your room. Simple as that. The weeping man will be gone, and it will be like nothing happened. If you, however, manage to make it through the hunting ground and make it to the building, you'll have won. Once you make it to the building, you'll see the weeping man, and he'll look at you and say, "What a hunt that was," before disappearing. Now you, if you have successfully completed the Deadman Hunt, I would like to congratulate you. You are definitely a cut above the rest. Now it's time to claim your prize. Simply open the door and step inside. Once you step inside, you'll be in a beautiful white room, and the person you were looking for will be there, sitting in a chair. You'll take a seat, and you'll both have 66 minutes to talk. Now, there are some rules, of course. For one, they'll have no memory of what the afterlife is like during this talk, so you can't ask them what heaven is like, or did they go to hell, or anything like that. They won't know. It will seem like one big slumber as far as they are concerned. You, however, get to catch up on things on Earth, and you can tell them anything you like. Maybe give them a hug, or solve some unresolved feelings or issues. This is your prize. Once the 66 minutes are up, they'll disappear, going back to where they came. You'll walk outside and see the weeping man. He won't smile, he won't cry, or even scream at you. You'll say, "Thank you for the hunt," and then you'll be gone. When you return back to the land of the living, nothing will be different. You'll look at the clock and see that only 2 minutes have passed. It's midnight. Good job. You solved the Deadman Hunt, and I hope you get the closure you were looking for. Now you might be wondering why I'm sharing this with you. Like I said, I'm nobody special. I'm not some hero, but I believe anyone should have the chance to get closure. Anyone should have the chance to go hunting. But be warned that if the weeping man catches you, you'll join his horde. The horde of the weeping man that wanders throughout his hunts for all of eternity. You'll wish you never played this hunting game, and you'll spend the rest of eternity sharing the weeping man's fate, no longer able to see your deceased loved ones again. But what happens to your body, you might ask? After all, you're not really dead. Well, you see, a body without a soul is like an empty shell for a crab. Your body will become free rein to anyone who cares to claim it as their own. The first to stumble on your lifeless, comatose body will have it as theirs. You can't control which fortunate soul claims your body. Maybe it will be someone who simply wants a second chance at life, and so they'll use you to live the life they failed at the first time around. Or maybe it will be a spirit that feels some guilt and chooses to pretend to be you until your inevitable death, using your brain and your memories to seamlessly blend into your life. Have you ever had a friend who acted normal, but you started to randomly feel something was off with them? Like, despite being the same, there was something different with them. I'll leave that to your imagination. Or maybe you won't be so lucky, and the person who receives your body will be a true monster. They'll use your body to commit horrific crimes until they find themselves deceased or in jail, ruining not only your reputation, but your loved ones as well. Or maybe they'll be more subtle, taking out their pent-up emotions on your friends and family until they all but abandon you, leaving you hated by the people who love you the most, and them never knowing that you're truly gone. These are all possibilities, but if you manage to make it this far, I doubt you'll turn back now. Isn't there someone who you want to see again? Some past lover, a wife, a brother, or even a friend? Well, don't be shy. Nothing is free in this world. If you want to see them again, the price is to survive the hunt. Oh right, that reminds me. I remember one last thing while editing this letter. For the love of God, during the first or second part of the ritual, don't drop your protective item, because if you do, when the weeping man hunts you, your body will be unprotected, and a vessel without protection is a very valuable thing. Not only other ghosts and spirits who want a second chance at life, but also to demons, monsters, and other things that hide in the dark, whether for hunger or to find themselves a warm place to hide in so they can return to the other side. But not only is your body at risk, but also your soul. After all, there's a reason so many demons make deals for these things. So they must be powerful, or at the very least useful. I don't really know, but if you find out, hopefully the thing that takes your body or soul will be kind enough to give us a little hint. Now, happy hunting, my friend, and remember to survive at all costs. I showed this letter to my commanding officer, and he laughed at me and told me this was obviously some prank, and I was just being a shook rookie. But I'm not so sure. I have a feeling due to all of the former victims' deaths, and the evidence adds up too well. I remember seeing one of the victims, Amy, before she was found dead. She looked like she was possessed, a deranged look in her eyes. I think this ritual is real. I don't know who the man is. After trying to search for him, there are no records of him in this town. He scratched out the name of the supposed secret organization, so I can't even find it. Just a few weeks ago, I found my neighbor purchasing 6 full-body mirrors from an online store. If anyone has any information on this ritual, it would be pretty helpful. I'm also tempted to give it a shot. The people in my town seem to be dead set on giving this ritual a shot, so why shouldn't I? It's not like I'm breaking the law, and if it fails, I can cross this lead off my list. I just think it would be kind of nice to see my deceased wife one last time. Anna, can you room the next patient? I asked, glancing up from my notes. Sure, she'll be in room 5, she replied, heading down the hall. I quickly reviewed the patient's history that Anna had written up. The lady had been complaining of a haze that seemed to come and go, and occasional stabbing pains in her left eye that began several days ago. Nothing out of the ordinary, really. It was probably just a combination of floaters and dry eye. In my mind, the diagnosis was already locked and loaded, but just out of precaution, the patient was dilated to make sure there wasn't anything going on with her retina. Satisfied with my guess, I took off my readers, picked up my laptop, and entered room 5. Mrs. Myers, it's good to meet you. I'm Dr. Ronald. It's nice to meet you too, she replied, her voice tense. Mrs. Myers was a young lady, her hands clutching her handbag in the exam chair, her eyes hidden behind a pair of sunglasses far too large for her face. "Sorry for the sunglasses, Doc. Since yesterday, my eyes have been really sensitive to light." Faint alarm bells started to ring in my head, but I pushed the thought aside for now. "Oh, it's no problem. Why don't you tell me a little more about what's been going on with your eyes?" I asked, trying to sound reassuring. "Well, it's just my left eye, really. Since Saturday, I feel like my vision's been getting worse, like a fog's been building up. And I get these shooting pains from time to time. It almost feels like someone is poking my eye from the back. I had lunch with a friend on Friday who had similar symptoms at the time. I was wondering if it's a weird form of pink eye or something." "Could be. How about let's take those sunglasses off, and we'll get a look at what's going on with your eye." "Oh, of course," she said, removing the oversized sunglasses. Under the slit lamp, her eyes seemed normal enough, with the exception of her left eye being somewhat bloodshot. With no clear explanation for her symptoms, I took out my fundus lens and peered into the back of her eye. I had caught no more than a glimpse of her retina before she shrieked and slapped the lens, knocking it rattling onto the floor. But even without that abrupt interruption, I would have dropped the lens in shock. In that brief, horrifying instant, I saw something that defied all logic. Her optic nerve was a pitch-black void, an abyss that seemed to swallow light itself. The optic nerve usually looks like a donut, with a dark orange outer ring surrounding a brighter inner circle. The inside of Mrs. Meyer's optic nerve was pure darkness. A perfect little black circle, almost like a miniature black hole, had manifested in the back of her eye, absorbing all light passing into it. As my mind spun in a whirlwind of confusion, Mrs. Myers tumbled from her chair, collapsing onto the floor with a shriek that pierced the air. She clutched her hand over her eye, her voice rising in a crescendo of panic. Just then, Anna burst into the room, snapping me out of my stupor. We rushed to her side, dropping to our knees to help Mrs. Myers. She was inconsolable, moaning and rocking back and forth, her distress palpable. "Oh God, oh God," she wailed, her voice cracking with terror. "There's something moving in my eye." As her screaming reached an unbearable climax, Mrs. Myers suddenly looked up from her prostrated position. Her hand was still cupped firmly over her eye, but now we could see the blood trickling down between her fingers, a crimson stream staining her pale cheek. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched in horror. Something was moving beneath her skin, forcing her fingers apart from the inside. The sight was grotesque, a nightmarish struggle playing out just beneath her flesh. With a final, blood-curdling scream, Mrs. Myers collapsed to the floor, her body convulsing violently. Her arms fell limply to her sides, revealing the true extent of the horror. Jet-black, spider-like appendages erupted from her eye, each one glistening with a wet, otherworldly sheen. They waved and writhed, searching for a grip on the slick linoleum tiles. Each movement left behind bloody scratches on Mrs. Myers' face, the lines of red contrasting starkly with her ashen skin. The appendages moved with a life of their own, a ghastly spectacle of wiggling limbs that defied all logic and understanding. The room was filled with the sickening sound of the scraping against the floor, mingling with the faint, gurgling moans that escaped Mrs. Myers' lips. The sight was more than I could bear, a vision straight from the depths of a fevered nightmare. Anna and I immediately fled the room, leaving Mrs. Meyer's twitching body and the ever-growing appendages writhing in a pool of blood on the floor. The next few hours were a disorienting blur. The police arrived, sealing off the clinic. Soon after, men in black suits took over, their presence cold and methodical. Anna and I were separated, each placed in stark white rooms and interrogated, forced to recount every harrowing detail of what we had witnessed. The questioning was relentless, and it felt as though we were trapped in a loop of terror, reliving the nightmare over and over. Finally, we were released, but only after signing hefty non-disclosure agreements. I'm writing this in the bedroom now. I know I signed the NDA, but somebody needs to know. The idea of returning to work seems impossible. I think I'll take some time off, perhaps go fishing, or finally make a dent in the Netflix watch list I've been building up. But first, I need to take some Tylenol for this shooting headache behind my eyes. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd get spooked by a good horror movie, or jump at an unexpected noise in the dark, but I always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. That changed last summer when I took a job that led me to the old Hartley house at the end of Willow Street. Now, I'm not sure what I believe anymore, but I know one thing for certain. Evil exists, and sometimes it finds a home in the most unexpected places. It started innocently enough. I'm a 23-year-old architecture student, and I was thrilled to land a summer internship with a local historical preservation society. My first major assignment was to survey and document the Hartley House, a decrepit Victorian mansion that had stood abandoned for decades. The plan was to assess its condition and determine if restoration was feasible. The house had a reputation, of course. Every small town has that one creepy building that's the subject of endless rumors and dares. Kids would dare each other to spend the night there, but no one ever did. Not really. There were whispers about the Hartley family, how they'd all died mysteriously over a century ago. Now the house had stood empty ever since, but I didn't put much stock in ghost stories and urban legends. My first visit to the house was on a sweltering July afternoon. The taxi dropped me off at the end of the overgrown driveway, and I remember thinking the place looked like something out of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of weathered brick and warped wood, with a tower on one side and a wraparound porch thick with vines. Most of the windows were boarded up, but I could see hints of stained glass behind the boards on the upper floors. As I approached the front door, key in hand, I felt a strange reluctance. It was like walking through molasses, each step harder than the last. I chalked it up to nerves and the oppressive heat. When I finally reached the porch, the wood creaked ominously under my feet. The key stuck in the lock at first, but with a bit of jiggling, it turned. The door swung open with a groan that seemed to echo through the entire house. The smell hit me first, musty and thick, with an underlying sweetness that reminded me of overripe fruit. I stepped inside, my shoes leaving prints in the thick layer of dust on the floor. The entry hall was grand, even in its state of decay. A sweeping staircase dominated the space, its once elegant banister now warped and splintered. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls in long strips, revealing glimpses of bare plaster beneath. To my left and right, open doorways led to what I assumed were the parlor and dining room. I spent that first day taking measurements and photos, scribbling notes about structural integrity and potential restoration challenges. It was tedious work, but I found myself oddly fascinated by the house. Every room seemed to hold whispers of its former glory, ornate moldings, fragments of expensive wallpaper, the occasional glint of tarnished brass. It wasn't until I reached the second floor that things started to feel off. I was in what appeared to be a child's bedroom, documenting the remains of a once cheerful nursery. Faded circus animals still danced across one wall, their painted eyes seeming to follow me as I moved around the room. I was crouched down, examining the base of an old rocking horse when I heard it, the clear, unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. The sound had come from somewhere above me, muffled but distinct. I held my breath, straining to hear more, but the house had fallen silent once again. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the empty room. No response. I told myself it must have come from outside, maybe some kids playing in a neighboring yard, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. The sound had been too close, too clear. I finished my work in that room quickly, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. As I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, in the thick dust coating the floorboards, was a set of small footprints. They led from the room I'd just left to the base of the attic stairs at the end of the hall. Child-sized footprints. Fresh ones. I stared at them for a long moment, my mind racing to find a logical explanation. Had some neighborhood kid snuck in while I was working? But I would have heard the front door open, and besides, these prints seemed to appear out of nowhere. There was no dust disturbed leading up to them. Against my better judgment, I followed the prints to the attic stairs. They went up a few steps before disappearing. The attic wasn't on my survey list for the day, but I knew I wouldn't be able to rest if I didn't check it out. The stairs creaked with every step, the sound impossibly loud in the silent house. At the top was a heavy wooden door, warped with age. It took some effort, but I managed to push it open. The attic was a cavernous space, the sloped ceiling creating deep shadows in the corners. Dust motes danced in the few rays of sunlight that managed to pierce through the grime-covered windows. The air was thick and stifling, carrying that same sickly sweet odor I'd noticed downstairs, but stronger here. I swept my flashlight across the room, taking in piles of forgotten furniture and stacks of mildewed boxes. Nothing seemed out of place or recently disturbed. I was about to turn back when the light caught something that made my heart skip a beat. In the far corner of the attic, partially hidden behind an old wardrobe, was a rocking chair, and it was moving, slowly, steadily, as if someone had just vacated it. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the gently swaying chair. The creaking of its runners seemed to grow louder, drowning out the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the movement stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I don't know how long I stood there, flashlight trained on that corner, before I finally managed to back out of the attic. I practically flew down the stairs, my earlier skepticism completely forgotten in the face of blind panic. I didn't stop running until I was out of the house and halfway down the overgrown driveway. Only then did I pause to catch my breath, hands on my knees as I gulped in the warm summer air. When I finally looked back at the house, I saw something that nearly stopped my heart. There, in a second-floor window, was a face, a child's face, pale and solemn, staring down at me. Our eyes met for the briefest moment before the figure melted away into the shadows. I'd like to say that was the end of it, that I quit the internship, told the Historical Society to demolish the place and never looked back. But that's not what happened. Because the thing is, I went back again and again over the next few weeks. Each time something inexplicable would happen. Objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, the sound of footsteps when I knew I was alone. But instead of driving me away, these occurrences only fueled my obsession with the house and its secrets. I threw myself into researching the Hartley family history, spending countless hours in the local library poring over old newspapers and town records. What I found chilled me to the bone. The Hartleys weren't just any wealthy family. They were involved in something dark, something that the papers of the time only hinted at in vague terms. There were rumors of occult practices, of children going missing in nearby towns, and at the center of it all was Edgar Hartley, the family patriarch. From what I could piece together, Edgar had been obsessed with the idea of immortality. He'd traveled the world, studying ancient texts and obscure rituals. When he returned to Willow Street, he was a changed man. That's when the disappearances started. The official story was that the entire Hartley family, Edgar, his wife, and their 3 children, died of influenza in the winter of 1891. But I found whispers of a different tale. Of screams heard coming from the house on a moonless night, of lights in the attic windows and chanting in an unknown language. The more I uncovered, the more I felt drawn to the house. It was like it was calling to me, revealing its secrets one by one. I started spending more time there, long after my official work hours were over. I'd sit in the rooms for hours, waiting, watching, listening, and then one night, everything changed. I was in the attic again, drawn there by the persistent feeling that I was on the verge of understanding something crucial. The rocking chair was still, but I could feel a presence in the room, watching me. "I know you're here," I said aloud, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I want to understand. What happened in this house?" For a long moment there was only silence. Then a whisper, so faint I thought I might have imagined it. "He's still here." A chill ran down my spine. Who? Edgar? The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath misting in front of me. The whisper came again, louder this time, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "He never left. He's waiting. He's always waiting." Suddenly the room exploded into chaos. Every object not nailed down began to levitate. Chairs, boxes, old picture frames. They swirled around me in a vortex of dust and debris. Through the maelstrom, I saw figures taking shape. Translucent, ghostly forms of children, their faces contorted in terror, and behind them, a larger shape was coalescing, a tall, gaunt figure in an old-fashioned suit. As I watched in horror, its features became clearer, sunken eyes, a wide, leering grin, and hands that ended in long, claw-like fingers. Edgar Hartley. His voice, When he spoke was like gravel grinding against my skull. "Welcome, my dear. We've been waiting so long for someone like you. Someone to continue my work." I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The ghostly children swirled around me, their whispers growing urgent. "Run! You must run!" Edgar's form glided closer, those terrible hands reaching for me. "You've come so far, learned so much. Join us. Join me. We have such wonders to show you." In that moment, I understood the truth. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a trap, a prison for the souls Edgar had taken, and a lure for new victims. And I had walked right into it. With every ounce of will I possessed, I broke free of the paralysis that gripped me. I ran, Edgar's enraged howl following me as I fled down the attic stairs. The entire house seemed to come alive around me. Doors slamming, floorboards buckling, the very walls pulsing like a living thing. I didn't stop running until I was far down Willow Street, the sound of my own panicked breathing drowning out everything else. When I finally dared to look back, I saw the house standing silent and dark once more, but in an upper window, I could just make out a figure, tall and thin, watching me retreat. I quit the internship the next day. I told them I was sick, that I couldn't complete the project. I tried to warn them about the house, but who would believe such a fantastical story? As far as I know, the Hartley house still stands at the end of Willow Street, waiting for its next victim. I'm writing this now as a warning. If you ever find yourself in a small town with a house that everyone avoids, a house with a dark history and a bad reputation, stay away. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Because sometimes, the monsters we tell ourselves don't exist are all too real. And sometimes, they're just waiting for someone curious enough, or foolish enough, to invite them back into the world. I thought I didn't believe in ghosts. Now I know better. There are things in this world that defy explanation, things that lurk in the shadows of old houses and forgotten histories. And once you've seen them, once you know they're real, you can never truly escape. So if you're ever driving down Willow Street and you see an old Victorian house at the end, keep driving. Don't slow down. Don't look back. Because Edgar Hartley is still there, and he's always waiting for someone new to join his family.